Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record, I attended Richmond Municipal Council's Committee of the Whole session on May 13th in Arishat. After the meeting, Warden Lois Landry and Deputy Warden Brent Sampson answered my questions. Near the beginning of the meeting, Cape Breton University President Dave Dingwall made a presentation in which he noted the contributions of former Isle Madame resident and Cape Breton businessman Jim Keogh, and pointed to the planned medical school. At the conclusion of the presentation, the CBU president requested $45,000 from the municipality for its Forever CBU capital fundraising campaign.
So CBU is more than just an academic institution. It is a catalyst for innovation, for economic growth, and social progress in our region. And I'll summarize as briefly as I can some of the initiatives that we have led with over the last number of years and are going to have a major impact. One is a partnership with Dalhousie University. We've launched a new medical campus training future doctors right here in Cape Breton. This effort addresses rural Nova Scotia's critical shortage of healthcare professionals. So I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. We've transformed the Canada Games complex into the Keogh Forum. I think many of you would know Jimmy Keogh and his wife Ramona. They have been major contributors to this particular facility. It's come in under $40 million. So it's also the home of female hockey. With all of this momentum, we're also navigating significant changes. Government funding cutbacks have forced difficult decisions, impacting not just our institution, but the broader community as well. Additionally, sudden federal policy changes in 2024 have dramatically reduced international students. So I want to be clear, as I think I have been in the past, that international students are not a burden. They are a future entrepreneurs, healthcare providers, and community builders. And I will continue to advocate for their vital contributions to Cape Breton's future. And I'm open to any questions that you would want to have on any part of this presentation, particularly the international students. So to position CBU for the next 50 years, we've launched the Forever CBU Capital Campaign, an ambitious $205 million initiative, and I'm proud to report that we've already gone over the halfway part. The campaign is funding transformational projects. Keogh Forum is the first arena in Canada, to be dedicated to female hockey. Our new medical campus is collaboration with Dow is a game changer. We took about a year to research the concept of a medical school in Cape Breton. And of all of our data, and we went to Australia, we were in many parts of Europe, many parts of Canada, it became very, very clear to us that if you take kids from Ontario and put them in a med school, they ain't coming to Richmond County. So the key is to get those smart, intelligent kids from rural Nova Scotia into a medical school setting. And then when they graduate, the prospects, the possibilities of them relocating back to a rural community goes to about 80%. And we have certain restrictions on what they can do and what they can't do, such as they have to sign a return to service. So enforcing that will take place as we move forward. Delivering culturally self-healthcare, particularly for Indigenous and African Nova Scotians, is a priority. Not many of them have applied, but we've put in place programs to assist them in terms of bridging abilities and aptitudes in the sciences, which is working quite well in terms of their advantage at CBU. So I'm here to tell you tonight that CBU is one of the most modern, collaborative, future-ready campuses in Atlantic Canada, if not in Eastern Canada. Richmond County and its citizens has always been valued partners to CBU. So tonight, we want to seek a deeper partnership. Tonight, I respectfully ask that the Richmond County support for the Forever CBU campaign with a contribution of $45,000, roughly $5 a person. Your investment will directly support the projects that build a stronger, healthier, more prosperous Cape Breton for generations to come. And I think all of us, wherever we come from, but particularly here in Cape Breton, know that the need for rural physicians is priority number one. And without those physicians in rural Nova Scotia, all of our health care will take a major, major hit. So together, I think we can ensure that CBU remains not just a university, but a powerhouse for the entire region.
Thank you very much. It really is something to see all of the things that we hear announcements about kind of condensed into a few minutes, and to see cumulatively how impressive that feels. So thank you very much for that. I'll throw it out to councillors if they have any questions for the team that are here.
Thank you, Warden, and thank you, Dave and Sarah, for your great presentation. I definitely echo the Warden's comments. It is very exciting times for CBU. I was on site. I mentioned to Sarah and Bill and Crystal earlier last week, and to see all that construction coming together is pretty something special, and to see the Kehoe name, which is from here in Richmond County, on that forum as well, was yeah, it was quite something to see. I can imagine the ceremonies to christen the building must have been beautiful. So I did, not so much a question, but a comment. In our grants and contributions discussion at budget time, we did have a $20,000 line item, not approved, but held, I would say, at the time. So you're suggesting that this would be 45, because that 20,000 was from a previous discussion, I believe. Do you recall that, Warden?
No, so that 20,000 was based on the fact that we knew you were coming and anticipated an ask. And so to Councillor Marchand's point, I think when we talked about 20, I think it was sort of with an understanding that there may be an additional in the next year. So your ask, I think, aligns pretty closely with what we were looking at over just a couple of years, whether it's 2 or, yeah.
I guess further to that, are you seeking the 45, like, could it be a 2-year contribution, so much this year? Okay, great, all right.
Just 2 points. You did reference the med school in Kehoe. One of the smart things that we did is that we came to Richmond County and we got Jimmy Kehoe to make sure that he would be the lead person on the construction of the med school. Yeah. Now, this is so important. On the construction of the med school, you can't fool him. When people say that my bid is for $27,950, Jimmy knows that. He's there every day at 6:45. His people are following the processes, etc. So he was able very, very quickly to identify all of the materials for the facilities. So we didn't get hit by the tariffs. In fact, he made a deal on the steel with a company in Halifax where we got the steel. Mm-hmm. Then the tariff came in, so the supplier could have upped his price. But because it was Jimmy and they had a handshake, we got it for a lower price. So our costs are not way out of whack as it relates to the med school. And they say, it's not me, people are saying in the construction industry, it is probably the most efficient building in the province of Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So on your question, yes, 2 years would be fine.
There are lots of Richmond connections and very pleased about it. And I feel like Sean and I would be remiss if we didn't mention that you may not pass by it if you go to West Arishat, but Xavier College actually began here in Arishat, just a few feet from this building. So lots of connections for sure. Anyone else have any questions for Councillor Sampson?
Yeah, for me, Dave, thanks for the presentation. And then, I'm a numbers guy. So for me to hear you say 45,000 and then just say $5 per resident, I'm like, that pretty much breaks it down to per resident. When you give a big number, most times people are like, oh, but then when you break it down, so to see it as $5, I don't think anybody's going to argue what's going on in the CBU and what's going on, with the nursing and medical schools and everything that you guys are doing. I don't think anybody is going to argue $5 per resident for the future that you guys are building, right? So the 38, the nursing seats going from 38 to 161, that's encouraging. To hear you say, to get people to sign, return to service and keep people here, that's encouraging as well, right? So great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say also as former principal of the school, the high school here in Richmond County, the SRCE school, it was always, a day of celebration when one of our kids got into the nursing program at CBU. Not just the nursing program, but it really is a stellar program. And so the reputation that program has is in schools that 20 years ago, we certainly didn't see that reputation at CBU. So yeah, kudos on that front.
Here's a little add-on for nursing. The students at CBU that are involved with nursing have the highest marks of the international test that they all have to become an RN. People say, how do you do that? How do you do that? Do you cheat? I said, no. But what they do is that when a nurse, for instance, is assigned to a hospital for her practicum, she is supervised by the nurse on the floor. CBU doubles up, and we send one of our professors to join with the supervisor and the nurse for the critical analysis of the student and their performance, both from a practical point of view and what are you doing from an academic perspective. So the student is in the middle and is getting that knowledge, that information, that feedback almost instantaneously before they leave the floor that day. As a result, when it comes to the writing of the exams, it's pretty good for them in terms of the pass. They pass it quite easily. Whereas other institutions don't do that. So I just thought
It really is a difference in kind and not a difference in degree in terms of the program. So yeah, much to be proud of there. So I will say, unless did you have another question? Okay. So I will say that we aren't going to make a motion to send this to budget because we already have sent it to budget. So in anticipation and following our discussions, we brought your ask, but we will revisit the dollar amount in our upcoming deliberations. So yeah, very optimistic. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming. We are grateful for your trip here to Richmond, and welcome to all of you who came, and safe travels as you head out.
How significant will the Cape Breton University Medical School be for healthcare in this region?
Oh, like tremendously impactful, I think. What I took away from, a part of what I took away from that presentation from Dave Dingwall marries up very nicely to what we heard from Gina McDonald from the Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health. And what the research and the literature and the anecdotal reports say is that bring in somebody from away to go to university or even to come to work here initially, and they just don't stay. They go back to where home is for them. And who can blame them? So if we can find ways we look at Gina McDonald going into the junior highs and the high schools and talking about careers in healthcare, to try to entice those folks to be healthcare providers here in their own community, in our community, really much more impactful. And so, he's kind of extrapolate that and you say, if you have a medical school that accepts folks from Nova Scotia and from rural Nova Scotia, says, look, here's how you become a doctor, and then where would you like to work? The uptake on that is, 80%, which is really significant. So I think that that's a really important piece for doctor recruitment in Cape Breton.
Council next approved a quitclaim deed for a property in Johnstown.
There is an EDPC memo, if you're following along at home, it's pages 53 to 58 in your package. And so there is an explanation about that, unless there's anything more staff would like to say. I'm looking for a motion that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that we approve the quitclaim deed as presented. So if anybody would like to start us off.
Okay. Madam Chair, through you to Council, and everybody watching, this has been vetted through legal as well. There is no need for us to keep this little piece of land there, so to release the claim on that so that the folks down there can do anything they want to do and move forward with that property. So.
Is there anybody like to start us off with a motion to facilitate some of that conversation?
We're quitting the claim on this. Are we giving it to the organization in front? To the church?
Yes, that's who it's claimed.
Giving it? Okay.
I'll make the motion to proceed with this.
Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to approve the quit claim deed as presented in the staff report. Can I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Membercat. Is there any other additional discussion on that matter? So hearing no additional discussion on that matter, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Now, the property in Johnstown that's Episcopal Corporation, I believe, is turning over. What's that about? What's that for?
Yeah, there are some times where we own parcels of land or, very, very, very many moons ago, we held on to parcels of land in exchange when other land exchanges, sales occurred. And so there is this very funny shaped piece of property in Johnstown that sits in an important piece of their plot there. So it's of no use to us, and it is of tremendous importance to that organization to be able to do work on the building that sits on there. And it's a tiny little piece, which I assume was carved, and it's landlocked. So, and I assumed it was carved, and I mean very tiny. And so it was no doubt carved out of a sale many generations ago, potentially. And so we're just sort of quitclaim deeding it back.
Is it by the former school in Johnstown? Is it?
No, I think it's on the other side of the road. So it's part of the church hall kind of thing there.
A $3,000 Tier 2 community grant fund request from the Whiteside Church Preservation Society was deferred to budget deliberations.
The next item is Whiteside Church Preservation Society, a grant application for Tier 2 community grant funds in the amount of $3,000. There's quite a bit of information there, but since our budget process has not been completed, we can have some discussion tonight, or we can refer this matter to the other side of our budget process.
I'll move that we refer this to after the budget is passed.
Seconded by Councillor Membercat. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Funding application from Whiteside, that was referred. You guys deferred that, did you not? Okay.
You will see that in our April May and June, usually, committee of the whole reports, where we'll get the same requests from community groups that we get at other points in the year, but we can't approve or even discuss requests for funds and through our grant program until we've approved the budget. So it's important for them to get in because they're in the queue, but it's something we defer because the budget needs to be finalized.
In the warden's report to council, Landry had council approve 2 motions dealing with the increasing deer population in the municipality. Later in the meeting, council reviewed a letter from Almadam farmer Robert Terrio about the impact from this rise in the deer population on his business.
The warden's report is attached. That's on page 78. If anybody has any questions, happy to entertain those. Hearing no flurry of questions. There are a couple of items under the warden that are really specific to District 2, and so in order to give those just discussion, I'm going to surrender my role as chair and have Deputy Warden step in.
So the next item, agenda item, to do with the deer. I'll pass that on to you, Warden.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. So I did want to, I put a memo in place so that, I would make sure I didn't miss anything, but I would also keep council informed about sort of the correspondence I've had with DNR. So perhaps we can begin with my first motion and then I want to say that I've put Richmond County, I'm open to an amendment should councillors want to do that. But I move the council send a letter to the Minister of Natural Resources urging the department to make changes to the 2025 fall hunt that recognizes the impact to residents of the exploding population of deer, particularly does, in Richmond County. So I'm hoping for a... So if I could, I reached out to the Department of Natural Resources to again speak about some of my concerns about the deer population, and specifically sort of concerns about the municipality's responsibility to do some of the studies on the deer pellets and the deer counts. The impetus for reaching out is really the letter that came to us from Robert Terrio. So you're talking about somebody who, for the first time in 31 years, is not going to plant because of the deer population. So I think the significance of what the deer are doing here on Almadam and the impact that that has on residents. So as an additional kind of, I had community meetings with across the county. So there's a grandmother who won't let her little girl run through the field they live next door, won't let them run through the field because of the deer and the ticks and the manure that they would have to go through to get from point A to point B. So in my discussion with DNR, they did actually point out that they are aware that vehicle strikes have been significantly have significantly increased. So just I won't read them out, but just I did sort of flag to them concerns about food security. So you have to the extreme, certainly, Robert Terrio saying that he's not going to plant. We have nobody's, like the number of people who have decided not to plant on Almadam is pretty significant. We have residents who are feeling, so I will tell you I work at the card plays or I work at the bingos, and there are people who won't go because they don't want to go through Discourse. So Michelle Hearn from the Rocky Bay, who puts on the for the like the plays, the dinner theaters, she says that there are routinely people who will tell her, we would love to go to your show, but we won't because we would have to drive through Rocky Bay at night. So if you are from the island, you'll know what I mean when we say we have actually tourists who will come onto the island, drive the north side, go around up by the old credit union and come down. And they're seeing, I have 85 here, but last week there was somebody who saw 95. So you're talking about an incredible number of deer. And seniors are not going to events because of that. We have concerns about tourism. We have concerns about proximity to homes and how close they are to our dwellings, coyote population, ticks, and vehicle accidents. So if you look at anybody who, you speak to anybody who does collisions, they'll tell you that the number of people who are going in to get their vehicles repaired. And although nobody has seen anything in writing, there have been references to residents from insurance companies that they are thinking about not allowing coverage for wildlife strikes on Almadam. And so we also have residents who are frustrated and taking matters into their own hands. So one thing we have not done is we have not actually written to the minister to sort of flag that our concerns are significant. And what we're voting on, what we have in front of us here is, I acknowledge Richmond County. If that's not a concern in other parts, sort of happy to have an amendment or to say just Almadam. But they are looking at the bonus hunt was meant to address the increase in deer population across Richmond County. There is talk of more significant steps, so looking to see from council whether they'd like that to be just Almadam or all of Richmond County. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm okay with it being Richmond. There are other areas, I think the St. Peter's, River Bourgeois area, where I hear a lot of complaints. 2 or 3 in my community have been hit pretty much right by my own home. So maybe we can flag some areas. We can do that maybe in an email, flag the areas where people have concerns, because, I mean, we don't want it to be all of Richmond, but we want more than one area probably looked at.
State Richmond highlight a few, yeah.
If it's easier, I'm happy to sort of have councillors talk about specific parts of their district that may be more problematic and incorporate that in something more specific about Richmond.
Yeah, I would agree that I'm okay with it being all of Richmond. I think we know that anything they do is going to be based on a count anyway. There's going to be some statistical data, but I would definitely support the specific mention of the village of St. Peter's. It's definitely been an issue, and I know that there have been some strikes, and it's it will impact people's ability to get insurance, either because they can't get it, which if this is now being considered for Almadam, or because it drives the cost up after a while, right? So anyway, I would definitely support that. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a seconder. Hearing no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. All right, we'll move on.
I do, yeah. So on that same theme, the deer population, when I met with them, this was actually a request that they made of us. So when I say they, I mean Department of Natural Resources. They suggested that we write a letter to Public Works to stipulate that in areas where the deer population is really significant, that the clearing of the roads in a really timely way can prevent strikes. It doesn't change the deer population, but it gives you a fighting chance when they come out. And as we know, it isn't just DNR or Public Works clearing the sides of the roads, it's also Nova Scotia Power. So just to write and sort of respectfully request that they consider the challenges we have with the deer population when they're scheduling their works. This was the request from DNR. So I move, that council send a letter to the Department of Public Works and Nova Scotia Power to request that roadside clearing be scheduled early in areas of Richmond County where wildlife strikes have increased in frequency.
Seconded by Councillor Marshaw. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor,
Yeah, I'm glad to see that motion, Warden, because, I've had residents reach out to me and ask for that specific approach to clear some of the roads. And like you said, they said, you don't stand a chance, I mean, you can't see them. They're popping out of the ditches and so I'm glad to see this motion on the table, and hopefully we'll see some action there and clear some of those roads and clear the ditches. Yeah.
I know somebody who does the work for Nova Scotia Power. They are very mindful of birds and nesting patterns, so it won't happen until nesting. That's part and parcel of how they do business. But if we could get some, goodwill on their side as they schedule going into the other side of nesting.
all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Now, when it comes to the deer, I know you made a Facebook page. Something I didn't get to ask you about, but I assume that's an attempt to quantify, and not only that, to provide some video, some pictorial evidence, accounts from people, kind of provide some data so they DNR can have some information?
Right. And you know, we want to have anecdotal information about not just the deer population, but where the deer are. So, you know, they're on the road. They're next to the road. They're on our lawn. And, you know, I think if you go to the picture that's on the profile of that Facebook page, you know, there's 12 deer in that picture, but there were 18 deer on that family's lawn. Nobody was feeding them. They're not there because they were being fed. They're there because they go wherever they want. They run the place. So really looking to get folks. So if you're listening at home and you have, you know, a beef about the deer, would encourage you to post your stories. So it was there that I saw Ruth, I think, posted about 95 deer on a trip. The pictures of deer, and I'm getting some also from other folks, and like I'm hearing from businesses who don't want to go public and be on that page about just how frustrating it is, and you know, people who have had sizable investments. We talk about, you know, we talk tonight about litter, and we're concerned about litter in the community, but the flip side of that is we have people who want to beautify the community, and they do that, the community, and they do that with flowers and bushes and shrubs that are, you know, you may as well just throw money at the deer because they're eating everything that you plant. So it is frustration, and we're looking to get as much information from residents as we can.
Now, your motion kind of alluded to this too, but essentially, if they could just issue doe tags with each deer license or one or two, wouldn't that help kind of at least combat this problem?
The doe tag situation is a huge part of this problem. So what on Isle Madame in particular, we have so many does, and what people who are especially novice hunters know is that if you drop a doe and you weren't supposed to, because the tag you have is for a buck, there are consequences to that. You know, they take away your whatever, your gun. Like there's serious consequences to that. So we're really interested in seeing what are the mechanisms so that we can get doe tags, or like they have in other parts of the province, not doe, not buck, deer, so that they are they're sexless sort of deer, so that you drop the first thing you see, so long as it's a deer. So whether or not it's bonus tags, something that makes note of the doe population.
Are you hoping that the letter from Farmer Robert Theriault in Arishat will get some movement from DNR on this issue?
It better. Like, you're talking about someone who has planted food that people in our community will eat, and do so by spending a lot less money than you're going to pay for vegetables in the stores. And he's not going to plant for the first time in 31 years because one reason only, the deer. That cannot go unnoticed by government. We cannot continue to have vehicle strikes and people not wanting to go to card plays and bingos because of the deer. And now food insecurity being disregarded because people cannot wrap their heads around doing something more substantive on Isle Madame and in other parts of Richmond County as well.
Council next voted to send a letter to newly elected Cape Breton Council Antigonish MP Jaime Batiste to bring him up to speed on the cellular phone service issues in Richmond County.
All right, Warden, I'll let you move on to the next item you have there.
Yeah, so I'll start with the motion, and I'll give you a little background, although it's there. I move the council send a letter to our new member of Parliament, Jaime Batiste, outlining residents' concerns about limited and deteriorating cell service across Richmond County.
I guess one of the reasons I'm jumping to second this one is because I heard just today from a person in the Sampsonville area, which has had really good cell service, that now on their property, which is not, there's not in the bottom of a valley, it's on a, you know, it just, the cell reception has just gone completely dead. So I think not only has the problem been progressively getting worse, I feel like now it's becoming rapidly even worse. So the pace of that decline seems to be accelerating. We've noticed it in our home, noticed it, along certain stretches of highway, and obviously now hearing from constituents about it. So it felt like it kind of was getting worse slowly over time. Now it's starting to feel like it's a more rapid decline. So I think this is a timely thing.
We'll say we did have conversations, so just for people watching, there was a motion passed by council to have Bell kind of come before us, and we are not able to compel them, so they did not accept our invitation. I will say that they did have a conversation with myself and the CAO, and they did talk about some challenges that they face. For example, probably 10 years ago, we had one computer and we were using that one computer. And yesterday I made note of the fact that my son had 3 devices going and my son had 2 devices going. I was doing an online webinar. I had 3 devices going. We were streaming television downstairs and my husband was on his phone as well. So there is a draw on cell service that is increasing. So as equipment is deteriorating and use is increasing, particularly as our population increases, it is becoming sort of exponentially challenging. So this actually was an interesting conversation I had with a resident who explained that we want to make sure that we're mindful of the fact that our MP, Jaime Batiste, is a seasoned veteran of the House of Commons, but not in this rural area. And so he is used to dealing with an area that is certainly more urban and closer to the urban center, whereas this is a considerable difference. So I think it would just be worth pointing that out to him.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Now, the letter that you're going to send to Cape Breton Council, Antigonish MP Jaime Batiste, is that an effort to kind of bring him up to speed on the issues that are specific to Richmond County? I know Councillor Mumbrick had mentioned the rapidly deteriorating service, which is something that a lot of us have encountered. And
yeah, it is. There are certainly some communities that have been struggling with cell service for a very long time, and we've seen some announcements from the provincial government and some from the federal, and we're pleased to support those to address areas that have never had good service. But it feels like it's one step forward, 2 steps back, because even though we're getting some infrastructure to address some of our long-standing challenges, places that had good cell service are now losing it. And part of it is because they're not doing repairs at the same pace that things are deteriorating. But as we see an increase in population and as people become more computer savvy and as people become more dependent on devices, the draw on those towers has gone up. So the towers are getting worse than the draws. And I was saying at council, there was, a point at my house, it was on a webinar, and I had multiple devices going. My son had devices going. My husband had a device going. And we were streaming a movie on television, not through cable, but through the Wi-Fi. So those things draw on cell service and towers when you're using data.
Landry gave an update on 2 projects at Pondville Beach Provincial Park. The first moving the current parking lot to a parcel along Gibbs Lane. The second reinforcing the wharf. Council also passed a motion to have staff investigate a letter of authority for the beach.
So my final one is because I was actually in conversations with DNR, the beach came up. So I wanted to give a little update to council because this had come to council, and I thought I would do that through a motion that I have written here, but I want to add a line to what I have in the notes. So I move that council direct staff to explore the municipality's option for a letter of authority between the municipality and the province for Pondville Beach and report their findings back to council upon completion of the work in the management statement. So my concern or my wish is that we look at it on the other side of work that's happening this year.
So when you're saying to explore the municipality's options for a letter of authority, just so I'm clear, but the expectation, staff would look into this, bring it back to council, and then we would further. Okay, fantastic. Just wanted to.
And I'm mindful of the fact that we have one more committee of the whole meeting, but I thought I would give a bit of an update. So as you know, there was some council help to draft a letter, sent a letter to the province. There was community engagement around the deteriorating conditions at the park. And so a community meeting was held in Rocky Bay in June, really well attended, and they gave really excellent overview of what kinds of changes could happen in Pondville Beach and why, and the role of the ecosystem. So really, really well thought out and really data-driven work. So 1.2 million has been allocated to the park, and it will go out in 2 tenders. One went out the first week of April and closed on April 29th. What will happen is whatever that gets awarded at, whatever dollar amount that is, you subtract that from 1.2 million. So if it comes in at $1 million, you have 200,000. If it comes in at 200,000, you have $1 million. So once that work is tendered, once that tender is awarded, they will then do the second bit of work, which is essentially armoring up the old wharf that's there. The wharf can't be taken out because it acts as a to prevent the dunes from closing up the brook. But there is a very significant possibility that so long as the parking lot doesn't drain the coffers, that there will be a significant accessibility piece built into that work, which then drives some conversations about what else could we do that we have never been able to do at a beach before, because the washrooms will be accessible, so will the change rooms, and so will access to the beach, and therefore the potential for accessibility. The park will be opened this summer. They'll put porta potties down there. So it's a good news story. I know we had heard rumors about artifacts that were found at the beach. There actually were artifacts. They were not time immemorial, thousands of years old. They were a few hundred years old. You're going to see it look like they didn't finish the project, because there will be two little areas cut out that will still have trees and branches. So it was tools from farmers from few hundred years ago. But I'd be interested in seeing what opportunities we have. But again, it would only be report back to us after the work is completed, so we can see what we have available to us.
A motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Now, for Pondville Beach, what would a letter of authority do? Like, why are you considering this option?
Yeah, so when the beach folks, when people who really wanted to highlight that there had been some deteriorating conditions at the Pondville Beach, when they brought their concerns to council, I think there was some frustration about, what can be done. And there was a look over there at Point Michaud and why can't we do the things that Point Michaud does? So there certainly was some comparisons. And in some respects, Point Michaud and Pondville are apples and oranges. They're not exactly the same. But, one of the responses that came during those kind of conversations was that there are certain things you could do at Point Michaud that you can't do just because you don't have a letter of authority. Now, a letter of authority is a discussion and an agreement between the provincial government, which owns the provincial park, that is Pondville Beach, and the municipality to allow us to do certain things. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand. A lot of water activities could only be done if we could get lifeguards. And we are probably never going to be in a position to actually find people I was a lifeguard. It takes years to become a lifeguard, and you really have to start when you're young to get to the point where you could do it as a teenager, and there are other jobs for people. So there are some things we probably logistically, based on lifeguard services, those might be challenging, but what is the art of the possible? What things could we do? And if accessibility, we know, is going to be built into the change rooms and the bathrooms, which draws a different group of people than you might see at other beaches. So what are the things that we might be able to do? And do we need a letter of authority to make those things happen? So to be clear, the ask was to get staff to investigate that and report back to us after the beach work is finished, so we'd have a sense of what things can we do now that there's been work at the beach.
Deputy Warden Brent Sampson had council agree to refer the purchasing and tender policy to the Bylaw Policy Committee.
Thank you very much. And so moving on to Deputy Warden Sampson, who would like to make a request to refer purchasing and tendering to bylaw policy.
It's basically nothing more than just that. I know our bylaw and policy list is fairly lengthy, so I thought I'll put this through now, and I don't think it's a big rush. But it's just, given the current climate of things going on, I thought it might be good for us to refer this back to policy and bylaw and just look to see if there's any specific changes we may want to make.
So is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
So when you talk about the current fiscal climate, what exactly are you referring to when you talk about those changes to the bylaws there?
Just procurement and tendering. Basically, what we've seen through federal and provincial governments kind of reviewing these practices. based on, the ever-changing tariff situations to the south of us. It doesn't have as big an impact on us directly, but I thought there may be something there that we should take a look at. And especially considering we have a long list for the Bylaw and Policy Committee, I thought I'll just refer it now and we can get to it when we have the time.
Now, is it possible it could change those bylaws, and how would it change those bylaws?
Well, I just wanted to basically get that conversation started. I didn't have anything too specific in mind at the moment. It was just whether or not, there's any kind of maybe local content things we could look at, or basically what we'd be allowed to do under the MGA.
Under correspondence, Council received a letter from Health and Wellness Minister Michelle Thompson about the effort to get a CT scanner to Strait-Richmond Hospital. The municipality also sent a letter to the Strait-Richmond Healthcare Foundation supporting their fundraising initiatives to get the CT scanner to the Evanston Healthcare Facility.
Under for information only, letter I is a letter from the Honourable Michelle Thompson, Minister of Health and Wellness. That's on page 96 if you're following along. It is actually in recognition of the letter that I wrote as a result of our discussions here. And it speaks about meeting with Glenn Cox. And so that meeting is already set up. So I'm having that meeting with this individual who is the Executive Director of Community and Rural Health for the Eastern Zone and leadership at the Strait-Richmond about the possibility for CT scanners. So I'll keep you posted on that. Letter of support for the Strait-Richmond Healthcare Foundation. And again, just to reiterate, that was so that the foundation had a letter they could take with them in their request for fundraising.
Now, in the letter from Health and Wellness Minister Michelle Thompson, she mentioned staffing and space issues when it comes to the getting the CT scanner Strait-Richmond Hospital. Is that the type of information you need to make this project proceed, or is it the type of thing that could cause delays unless you address them?
We are seeing staffing increases at the Strait-Richmond Hospital in ways that really are quite staggering. My father was in there from June 1st to September 1st of 2022. And there were, I think, 11 people. So most of the beds, including everything in what had been detox back there, that was all empty because of staffing challenges. I was there a month or so ago. Every room was full. There was people going through. I've been working with daughter of a person I used to work with, looking for a place nearby because she's going to start as an occupational therapist there, and she's not going to be the only one. And there's another lady across the street from me. Her daughter is now an X-ray technician. We have somebody who moved home to work there. So we're seeing real uptake. And what we know about recruitment is that it isn't just that we need to recruit people to work on these pieces of equipment. The fact is these pieces of equipment help lure people here. So doctors don't want to be frustrated by an inability to deal with patient care. So the more equipment we give them, the more likely they are to come here. And that's something we also heard from Cape Breton Recruiting for Health. And the space issue is really, let's get on it, because the spot in the hospital where we currently have dialysis is going to be freed up when those beds move into the new unit that's going to do dialysis. So now the timing is right, and I will say it was a really quick turnaround from our letter to the Minister of Health and Wellness, and I have a meeting on June 2nd as a follow-up to that. So, good conversations are where you start.
Under correspondence, Council sent a letter to Minister of Growth and Development, Colton LeBlanc, about the exclusion of 2 Point Tupper properties from the Atlantic Port Assessment.
Colton LeBlanc, Honourable Minister of Growth and Development, regarding the joint management of Point Tupper Industrial Park and inclusion in the Atlantic Port Assessment.
Now that a letter has been sent to the Minister of Growth and Development, Colton LeBlanc, what are the next steps to get the properties in Point Tupper included in that Atlantic Port Assessment?
Yeah, we've certainly been in contact with our MLA to sort of push that issue forward. We need to continue to advocate because, again, Invest Nova Scotia is the owner of those properties. Very mindful of that, very respectful of that. But It is also, Invest Nova Scotia, an agent of the provincial government, and it is not appropriate for the provincial government and the municipality to be working at cross purposes. So happy to hear that this is not a good fit for these pieces of property because we have other plans. Happy to hear a little bit about that, but would expect to be involved in those discussions. So we'll continue to advocate for this specific issue, which was to have those pieces of property in as part of the net zero study. What we did hear from the net zero folks is that there will be here's what's needed, sort of a generic, sort of not necessarily with respect to each port that's being assessed, but here's generically what we're going to be looking for. So we'll be able to continue those discussions around that Invest Nova Scotia land, but and so, it will continue to inform our discussions, but we are looking to see some sort of formal arrangement that would allow us to have good discussion with Invest Nova Scotia.
A report on municipal and village-led housing developments across Nova Scotia was then reviewed by Council.
Move on to item 14, unfinished business. So we had an action item on our list, item 260. So there was a motion of council to direct staff to investigate what other communities were doing, other municipalities, I guess, around housing. So housing development. So that information has been compiled in a very nice little report that's available from pages 110 to 124 for folks who are following along at home. Any discussion, comments, concerns? It will be certainly interesting to see what a new government with a new housing minister has to say about programs that may sort of spur development. Just a note on another sort of related topic. We had a motion of council to that came originally from the PAC that if there were any additional developers who would be interested in speaking to us. We didn't have a large uptake, and it was more people who were interested in what they might be able to do in the future. So we've pushed that back out a second time on our social media. So if any of you have any information about developers, by all means, please tell them to reach out. We'd love to talk to them.
What do you think can be learned from the municipal housing study to address housing in Richmond County?
I think that we are looking to steal any ideas we can. And we know that a federal election was just held. We have a new prime minister, and we have a cabinet that was sworn in today. So whenever a new government comes in, it really is about putting your fingers on the starting blocks and saying, let's see what they have to do, what they have planned for housing. So as we see what the federal government rolls out, we marry that up with, okay, who did something that we could do here? They're not necessarily, exact replicas that make sense from CBRM or HRM or Annapolis or whatever, but there are some really interesting things that municipal units have done. For example, CBRM has developed and I'm not sure if they're finished, but the plan is, and they may be finished, to come up with exact plans, housing plans for developers. So you don't have to decide what you're going to build. You don't have to do the architectural work. You don't have to get the specs. These are plans that you can go into the CBRM. You don't even have to go. They're going to be on their website and download those. So if can we share those and say to developers, look, here's some money you could save and some steps you could skip because we'll give you plans up front. CMHC has got a similar program. Haven't released the spec yet, but there is a catalog there. So we're looking to take any ideas we can from any other municipal unit.
Finally, municipal staff provided a memo on the Spike Fund program.
So that came from action item 510, and there is a staff memo there. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just that's great. We were able to find out a bit of information from how that one works. I'd be open to suggestions from staff of what you think could work here. It doesn't have to be a replica of that. That was kind of a starting point.
So Warden, just, I guess maybe it's a question on this, because the town of Kentville said they are funding that solely through donations. Does that, I wonder, is that the receipt of donations? Like in terms of our municipality, I don't think we have a history of collecting donations from community to fund that type of thing. Have we ever done anything like that? Do you?
That I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that.
Okay, I just wondered if that was,
But that is one of the. things
'Cause that-
we
that
would need to
sounds like
figure
what
out
they're
kind of
doing, right?
Mechanisms we're going to put in place here for this.
yeah, okay.
And we do have at our bylaw and policy committee, a donations policy, which does seem to align with how we would be able to issue receipts should we choose to kind of go that route. So the two things sort of would have to go hand in hand, should we want to follow this model. There may be a different model.
We see them both at the same time.
Yep. So is there some action we'd like to direct staff, or are we happy to sort of mull over it for a while and bring back our thoughts, or what? Where have we landed here?
Is this something similar to the Canadian Tire, the Jumpstart program?
Yes and no. In Kentville, it's actually for adults. It does allow for youth, but very narrow in scope, so only their own recreation programs. But it is primarily for adults. So similar.
Yeah, and I don't think that's how we have to go here. I just mean that was a starting point kind of thing. But the jump start, from what I gathered from some people, you got to sort of know well in advance and so on, and it doesn't always accommodate a lot of people.
Move on, and if somebody wants to circle back at that point, certainly we
Madam
can.
Chair, if I
Yo,
could,
please
just
do.
through you and your mic being on, will catch my voice anyway, so we'll circulate to council looking for feedback on age limits, eligibility and stuff like that as we move forward with it, just so we get a feeling for what council would like to do on this, all right, as we dig into this, right?
We don't have an idea yet, exactly.
Well, that's it.
I think that I would have a different opinion about whether I want to move forward if I had some input into, would it be for children, would it be for adults, would it be for recreation programs, would it be for high school programs, so I'm open to feeding into staff some information about where I think, and then bring it back for more discussion. Councillor Mumbercup?
Warden, I'm wondering if we could refer this to policy and bylaw for discussion in tandem with our receipt of donations policy, and that way we would have sort of our public member available to provide input as well, and which I think is always helpful. So I would make a motion to refer it there.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because that does need to be funded somehow, and if we're looking at being able to potentially do it through receipted donations. So is there any other discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Now, the Spike Fund, how exactly does that work?
So from what we understand in the memo from staff, it's something that in probably 2022, I believe, I was at a conference in Digby, and there was a councillor at the time from Kentville did a presentation on this, and she was really excited about, how it worked out in their county. It was something the recreation staff handled, that it's mainly driven, from what I gather, from community donations, and it allows people to partake in recreation programs, and not just programs, but any type of recreation in general. If there's cost barriers for people, there's a certain amount they can help out with, and then staff would sort of procure these items that they may need. And it's basically to try and get people involved in recreation, to get them active, and folks throughout the county are able to donate to it to sort of top up the fund, and they're able to help folks in need.
Now, does it have to follow a donations model as far as for funding, or?
No, not necessarily, but I just, I use that as an example, and then we'll look here, and staff will look into it and see what can be done. I didn't have the intention that we want to do this exactly the same or anything, just that I thought it was an interesting concept, and maybe we could look at something similar here.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.